What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Wrasslin for Life Network, and welcome back to another episode of the TNA Impact Review. We have a lot to talk about today. Rosemary was in action on this week's episode of TNA Impact. The TNA World Championship was on the line. It was a great episode. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Wrasslin for Life Network. I am your host, as always, for the TNA Impact Review, Ringsider Anthony, and we'll be talking about the August 8th edition of TNA Impact. And the show kicked off with a six-man tag team match. It was the Rascals versus Kushida, Trent Seven, and Speedball Mike Bailey. And if you watched last week's episode, there was a challenge thrown out by the Rascals because their first X Division match ever on TNA was a six-person tag team match, and they kind of wanted to recreate that moment and recreate that magic, and they were able to do that in this six-way tag team match. This was a excellent match by both teams, by the Rascals, by Kushida, Trent Seven, and Mike Bailey. So happy again that Mike Bailey is the X Division champion. But yes, this was a phenomenal match to kick off TNA Impact. Kudos to everyone involved, but the Rascals seem to be picking up those wins, not just in TNA, but in NXT as well. And in this next episode of NXT, MSK will be challenging for the NXT Tag Team Championship. So we could have a member of the Rascals from TNA holding some NXT gold. I don't know. We'll have to find out this coming week on NXT. But yes, this was a phenomenal match to kick off TNA Impact. Kudos to everyone involved. They delivered. This is how you start off TNA Impact. It's total nonstop action wrestling, right? They gave it, they proved it in this match. Phenomenal match, won by the Rascals. Jordynne Grace has proved time and time again that she is a fighting champion in TNA wrestling. She is a fighting TNA Knockouts World Champion, and that does not end because next week, as always, Jordynne Grace is throwing out an open challenge to anyone in any company to come challenge her for that TNA Knockouts World Championship. I'm sure it'll be someone from NXT. It could be Natalya. I don't know. I'm still waiting for that moment. I'm still waiting for Natalya versus Jordynne Grace for the TNA Knockouts World Championship. But yes, tune in next week. It is going down. Jordynne Grace will be defending the TNA Knockouts World Championship in an open challenge. Rosemary finally returned to action on this week's episode of TNA Impact, and I'm trying to narrow down what Rosemary is doing, but she faced someone named Kristara. Hopefully I pronounced that right, but this was light work for Rosemary. Easily light work for Rosemary as she returns to the ring on this week's episode of TNA Impact. The ending of the match was crazy because she hit her finisher, she pinned her, but then she pulled out like a knife, like a dagger. I don't know. It was disturbing. And then at the end, she pulled out a black rose from a bag and laid it on, like I said, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but Kristera's chest, and had her like she was unalived. Very disturbing, very creepy, but yet cool all at the same time. I think what they're trying to head to with Rosemary is maybe a potential feud with Ash by Elegance. Ash by Elegance did take out Rosemary's tag team partner at Under Siege. She took out Havoc, like literally took out Havoc. So I think Rosemary's goal right now is to potentially feud with Ash by Elegance and her concierge, George Iceman. So we have to see where this goes here. But I've been saying this for the past couple of weeks on all of my social medias that I love what TNA is doing with Rosemary. I think it's super cool. I think they've picked up their production when it comes to video packages. They've done it with Rosemary. They've done it with Mike Santana, Giselle Shaw, and a host of others. But this Rosemary one is hitting different, and I really am enjoying it. Can't wait to see what happens with Rosemary and if she does eventually go after Ash by Elegance. But I think TNA is setting up their secondary women's feud, and this should be a good one. We get a backstage segment with the system. Last week, the system looked defeated. It was the TNA Impact after Slammiversary. So they looked defeated, they looked busted, disgusted, they looked out of it because the majority of them, except Alicia Edwards, no longer hold gold. This week, there was a different mood for the system. They were kind of excited, they were kind of hyped. Moose even said that they're in a rebuilding stage. All of them will regain their titles back, and he said they're going to wreak havoc over TNA wrestling. This is the system that I needed to see because yeah, last week they were looking broken, beat, disgusted. Just they were terrible. They were terrible last week because of what happened at Slammiversary. This week they got their confidence back. They were happy to be back, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next phase of the system. The first phase, the first 6 months of the system. Top tier work by all of the members of the system. So in this next phase, I want to see what happens. Will they regain their titles? Will they take over TNA? Will Moose be that top guy again? He's always going to be that top guy, but will he hold that gold once again in TNA wrestling as the system moves into their second phase? I think so. But yeah, the system is in rebuilding stages. They're ready, they're willing, and they're wanting to wreak havoc over TNA wrestling. For the second week in a row, we were supposed to hear from Josh Alexander. They hit his music, he didn't come out. The ring announcer announced him to come out, he didn't come out, but he was backstage, and Gia Miller got a chance to interview him. Gia Miller looked terrified. Josh Alexander angry and upset is terrifying. So I understand why Gia Miller looked the way she looked, but he said to Gia Miller, I owe no one an explanation. I owe no one an explanation. I'm the one that carried TNA Impact on my back. I carried TNA on my back for years, and I deserve the respect that other people are getting. He said he kept the doors open for people like Joe Hendry and Nick Nemeth to show up in TNA. He is the heart and soul of TNA, and he should be getting the same respect that Nick Nemeth and Joe Hendry is getting. Plain and simple. There's no more explanation needed for that. Josh Alexander said what he said. He carried TNA on his back, and he deserves the respect that every other superstar is getting. That is what we got from Josh Alexander. And this heel run from Josh Alexander, I feel like is going to be generational. This lo- this now leads us to our next match on the card. Ryan Nemeth versus I don't like that. This leads us to our next match on the card. It was Frankie Kazarian, the self-professed king of TNA wrestling, versus Ryan Nemeth. And this was a solid match on both ends. Nothing special really happened here. I am shocked that Frankie Kazarian picked up the win, but then it kind of was explained after, like why he picked up the win, because right after that, Josh Alexander came to the ring and he attacked Ryan Nemeth. He is out for anybody that has came in recently, I feel like, with the exception of Mike Santana. That could change later down the line. But yeah, Josh Alexander is out for anybody that's kind of taken the spotlight away from him, because he was the one to, like he said, carry TNA on his back for years. So Josh Alexander is out for Nick Nemeth, is out for Ryan Nemeth, is out for Joe Hendry. Anyone that's kind of making their name a name for themselves right now in TNA, he is out for them. So he attacked Ryan Nemeth, and that kind of ended that entire segment. But yeah, Frankie Kazarian picked up the win in this match, and then there was an attack by Josh Alexander to Ryan Nemeth. The knockouts division always knocks it out of the park, and this was no different. Masha Slamovich versus Jodi Threat, and I feel like they were picking up where they left off at Bloodsport, GCW Bloodsport. Last Saturday, they faced each other. Masha Slamovich won. They carried that momentum. I feel like they carried that momentum into this week's episode of TNA Impact. That match was great. Masha delivered, Jodi Threat delivered. Masha is one of the best in the Knockouts division. Jodi Threat and her tag team partner as a whole, Danny Luna, are both on the rise in TNA wrestling. This showed Jodi Threat's skills. This showed that Masha Slamovich is a tough woman to deal with. This was a phenomenal match on both ends. Kudos to both women. Jodi Threat surprisingly picked up the victory, but I think they needed this. After losing at Slammiversary, they didn't capture the Knockouts Tag Team Championships. I think Jodi Threat and Danny Luna needed this. Hopefully they run back that match, run back that Tag Team Championship match at Emergence. So hopefully Danny Luna, Jodi Threat, Spitfire will pick up those Knockouts Tag Team Championships very shortly. But fire match for both of these women tonight. Like I said, they carried it over from Bloodsport all the way to TNA Impact the following week. I quickly want to touch on Joe Hendry. We had a video package of Joe Hendry. Basically, he was talking about his rise in TNA and his rise in professional wrestling as a whole, and how he wants the TNA World Championship. That is what he is after, the TNA World Championship. And I feel like Joe Hendry will have that TNA World Championship sooner rather than later. But that is what Joe Hendry is doing right now. He is all over professional wrestling. NXT, TNA. I think he's going to be at a GCW event soon, at a House of Glory event soon. Man is over in all of professional wrestling. He will be wrestling on this week's episode of WWE's NXT. Man is over. Joe Hendry is it right now in professional wrestling. And if you're not watching him, you really should be, because he is probably one of the best things going in professional wrestling. Before we head into the final two segments of the night, I do want to talk about one thing, and that's Mike Santana. He did face Champagne Singh or Campaign Singh. It was a match, right? Yeah. Mike Santana won, not surprised. Don't really want to talk about the match. I want to talk about what happened, and that is Mike Santana calling out Moose. I want that. I want that match, and I want that match today. Like, give me Moose, give me Mike Santana in the same ring. Those two gentlemen will tear the house down. He called out Moose because basically not Moose, but Moose took him out before Slammiversary. He cost him the title match. It was JDC that really did that, but it was Moose's doing that made JDC do this. So he's called out Moose, and I want to hear Moose's response. I don't know if we hear from Moose next week on TNA Impact. I don't know, but I need it. I need it in my life. I need Mike Santana versus Moose, and it needs to happen at Emergence. Don't wait until Bound for Glory. Don't wait until Victory Road. Have this at the end of August at Emergence, because I'm ready for it. We are down to the final two segments of TNA Impact. The first of the two segments is the TNA World Championship match. Nick Nemeth defending against Mustafa Ali. This was incredible. This was an incredible match by both men. Both of these men were let go by WWE. Both of these men are in TNA wrestling and showed what they can do. These men deserve all the flowers in the world. This was an excellent match. There's no words to say how into this match I was. Both of these guys delivered. No surprise here that Nick Nemeth did retain. This seems like this is the end for Mustafa Ali right now in TNA wrestling. He did pen a letter after the match, posted it on social media, and in so many words said he was taking a step back from TNA wrestling. Mustafa Ali had not signed a deal with TNA wrestling. Matt Hardy has not signed a deal with TNA wrestling. TNA wrestling works off these, I don't want to call them handshake deals, but they're not signed to a full term with TNA wrestling. And Mustafa Ali was one of them. Carried the X division for 6 months with his gimmick, with his style of wrestling, with his promos. Kudos to Mustafa Ali for reinventing himself outside of WWE after they let him go. Stellar performance from January, or when he showed up in January, all the way to the end of July here with Mustafa Ali. Kudos that he came to TNA to hone his craft, hone his skills. Man ran the X division for 6 months. Stellar performance in his last match. Stellar performance in his last match with Nick Nemeth. And it was good to see both of them in the same ring in TNA, showing the world what they can do. The ending segment was the wedding of PCO versus Steph Dlander. And it seemed like this was going to be a normal wedding, but we never have normal weddings in professional wrestling. This was a fun segment. I believe at one point, PCO pulled out his grandmother's ring, and it was on a finger that was unalived, like the ring was still attached to the I don't I'm not sure where PCO was going there. But yeah, First Class came out, and I thought this was going to be the moment that the wedding was ruined. But actually, AJ Francis said he wanted to see the wedding. He said, "We had a great feud, but I actually want to see the wedding." So the wedding proceeded. And when it came down to kissing the bride, which was Steph Dlander, Matt Cardona returned to TNA, showed up, and attacked PCO, tore up the wedding set, and basically made Steph Dlander cry. That's how we ended TNA Impact. Steph Dlander crying, being consoled by Xia Brookside, PCO regaining consciousness from the attack, trying to stand by Steph Dlander. And you can hear in Steph Dlander's voice that, like, why? Why did you do this? And Matt Cardona said, it was me and you. It was me and you. And that's basically how TNA Impact ended this week, with the wedding of PCO and Steph Dlander. I don't know where we go from here. I'm guessing we get a feud with Matt Cardona and PCO, because it seems like the feud with PCO and AJ Francis is over. AJ Francis actually said they want the TNA World Tag Team Championship. So I'm guessing we're heading to Matt Cardona versus PCO in the near future. Great wedding segment on TNA Impact this past week. I enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to what happens in these next set of tapings that are actually going down today in Tampa, Florida. So over the next couple of weeks, it builds up to Emergence. I'm excited for that, but this was an excellent episode of TNA Impact. All right, guys, that is the end of the TNA Impact review this week. Like I said, we covered a lot. We covered everything that went down on this week's episode of TNA Impact. I will be back as your host next week to cover next week's edition of TNA Impact and all of the things that happen in between. If we get some news, contract news, backstage news, whatever it is, I will be covering it all next week on the TNA Impact review. If you are watching on YouTube, I want to say thank you. If you are listening on any of the podcasting platforms, I want to thank you as well. And I will see you in the next one.